All right, we're going to start off by working on the cabinet of the bookcase. What you need is about a half a sheet of plywood. You're going to need to cut it into 3 pieces. One that's 24 by 32 and 2 that are 24 by 24. You'll actually end up with an extra shelf. You can save that for another project. All right, we're over at the table saw. I'm going to set my fence to 11 1/4. Now you might be thinking, the bookshelf is supposed to be 12. Why are we cutting to 11 1/4? Well, we're actually going to put a 3/4 inch solid face frame on there. So 11 1/4 plus 3/4 equals your 12. Let's go ahead and make a couple cuts. We're going to start out with the sides. Without moving the fence, this will guarantee that all the shelf pieces are the same exact width, and regardless of what we set it at. We're going to make the other cut. Moving the fence, we're going to cut our shelf pieces now. We're going to top, a bottom, and a middle. Pay attention with these because they're square, that you cut with the grain, not across it. Now that we got our pieces cut to width on the table saw, the next step is to cut them to length. To guarantee that we get exactly the same length, so we have a level bookshelf, we're going to use what's called a stop block. So clamp a block of wood to your fence. Make sure you don't get any sawdust trapped up against there, and don't slam the board against it, and that'll stay accurate for you. And now that we got our 2 sides cut, we're going to readjust the stop block to 23 1/4 for the shelf pieces. And just repeat the procedure. We've got our 3 shelves cut to the same length and the same width. And again, we've got our 2 sides cut to the same length and the same width. First thing you need to do is decide about your middle shelf. Is it going to be permanent or is it going to be adjustable? If you do want it to be fixed, now's the time to decide, because we're going to lay out for all the permanent shelves. In our example, we're just going to lay out for the top and bottom. All right, the plan calls for the bottom shelf to be 3 inches from the 3 inches up. We're going to go ahead and make a mark at 2 1/4 also, because our shelf thickness is 3/4 of an inch. This way there's no doubt as to where the dado blade should cut. Going to square those across. When it comes to the other end, we're just going to put a mark at 3/4 from the top, because the top shelf is even with the top of the bookshelf. And we'll just square that line across. One thing I like to do also is transfer the marks to the edge of the board. What we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is cut the rabbet on the top. And we're going to use what's called a stop block again, to make sure that our dado cuts are in the same place on both boards. It's crucial that everything's square and identical at this point. Once I get it lined up, lock it in place, adjust the stop block. Again, making sure there's no sawdust. Now that we got both the rabbets cut on the top, we're readjusting the stop block to cut the bottom shelf dado. And the procedure is the same. All right, so far what we've done is made identical pieces. Other than the inside and the outside, the direction really hasn't made a difference. The next step we're going to do is put a recess or a rabbet in the back edge, so that way when the plywood goes on the back of the cabinet and it's against the wall, you don't see that layered edge. However, if you're not careful, you can actually make 2 left sides. That's not very good for a bookshelf. So what we're going to do is we're going to write FL and FR, front left, front right, so that way we know. We're going to use a handheld router with a rabbeting bit. Cut the rabbet in the back. Just get a sheet of pegboard, cut approximately the same size. We've got it labeled bottom front, back, and top. That way everything orientates the correct way each time and the holes match up. Line it up with the drill bit off, that way you don't wobble out the pegboard hole. And just repeat the procedure. Alright, we got one side done. We'll flip to our other side. And I want to make sure I flip the jig, that way everything lines up the same direction. Since we cut a rabbet in the back of the side pieces, we're going to need to adjust the width of our shelf pieces. And this can be done on the table saw. Alright, now that we got our shelves adjusted, we're going to do what's called a dry fit. And I'm going to dry fit it with the front side down. What we're going to do is we're going to measure from the top of the bookshelf to the bottom of the shelf, and I got 27. And we're going to measure in between the rabbets. And make sure this is tight together. Now I've got 23 and 3/16. I'm going to go ahead and cut it 23 and 1/8. We're measuring for the back. I don't want the back to force the sides out by being too tight. Alright, we've got all our pieces. We've got our two sides, our back panel, and our three shelves. The next logical step would be to go put this thing together. However, I found through experience you're better off doing a little bit of sanding now with our individual pieces. This is plywood that we're using for the case. You've got about a 30-second or less of actual oak, and then it's poplar or pine in the middle. So start out with 150. Normally you might do 80 or 100, but all you're trying to do is get rid of any splinters from the adjustable shelf pegs, pencil marks, whatever. Now, one of the things that I really strongly suggest you do is put a mark real lightly with the pencil line about the center of the dado groove. Up here it's not really necessary because you know along the edge. Sanding off a pencil line is a lot less of a hassle than it is dealing with a missed nail. Alright, we're actually ready for assembly. I've got my 4 pieces laid out, and if I was adjusting the middle or adding a permanent shelf in the middle, I'd have that ready to go also. Again, we're using the glue and nails. So what I'm going to do is put a thin bead of glue along each corner. That allows it to kind of seep around. Do the same thing on the rabbet, one in the corner and one about the center. Takes 2 to 3 nails. Repeat it from the bottom. Don't move the project during assembly. Work around the table. Alright, for the back we switched to a stapler. Okay, we haven't been too concerned about assembling very square. We're going to use the back plywood. As long as everything is cut square, we can use the back as a large square. However, you need to follow this procedure doing it. Line up this corner, put 1 staple. Keep it tight along the edge. And put another staple. Now that that's all tight, we got a little bit of an overhang here. We're going to tap the bookshelf up so it's all flush along the top and staple the corner. Now that we got basically a triangle created, the cabinet carcass or case is square. When I staple the rest of these, I want to make sure the staple goes in parallel to the shelf. And about every 6 or 8 inches, put a staple. On the edges, make sure you put a slight angle, but not too much. That way it goes into the side and not out into the inside. If I had a middle shelf, I'd have drawn a line and done the same thing there. Pay attention when you're stapling. It's a bear to try to get the staples out and keep the project looking neat. All right, there we have it. We've got our cabinet or our bookshelf carcass together. This concludes this part of the video.